The Sawyer Mini is the most versatile personal filtration system available. It's a perfect solution for backpacking, hiking, hunting, fishing, scouting, international travel, and emergency preparedness. At a mere 2 ounces, the Mini fits in the palm of your hand and can filter up to 100,000 gallons of water from any freshwater lake, river, or stream. The Sawyer Mini has a 0.1 micron absolute pore size. It was tested to 10 million parts of bacteria and 1 million parts of protozoa without a single breakthrough. This is the highest level filters can be tested to, so we're confident these are the highest rates of filtration available.
And we're back. And man, we've got an awesome panel tonight. We've got Mike Glover in the house to talk about deploying spec ops soldiers to Mexico to fight the cartels. But before we do that, I'm going to bring in Jeremy Blossom from Advantage Gold. He's the much smarter guy than me that's doing the webinar tomorrow night, where if you sign up, you get one of these 1 ounce solid silver bullets, 45 ACP size, plus a whole bunch of other free stuff. So I'm bringing him in right now and we'll get started. Jeremy, good to see you.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me. So glad to be here tonight.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Keep sending me these silver bullets. We'll be friends forever.
Make it happen.
So tomorrow night, we're doing this webinar on preps that people should complete before January 20th, on the chance that we could have some SHTF stuff unfold, terrorist attacks, whatever else the case may be. And anybody who signs up, it's the first link in the description below. Jeremy's going to send you one of these 1 ounce solid silver bullets in case you come in contact with a werewolf or something like that. Plus, you've got a whole bunch of other stuff, some books and stuff. Maybe share that with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. So we're really excited to do this event with you. You help people prepare for the unexpected from a survival standpoint. And I like to think of Advantage Gold as helping people prepare for the unexpected from a financial side. So a lot of people are prepared because of you on what types of crazy things could come down between now and January 20th. But I think a lot of people are asking themselves, okay, well, how do I protect myself financially? How do I protect myself monetarily? And we're approaching $36 trillion in national debt. And the transfer of power is the most vulnerable period of time that we face as a country every 4 years. And with each side, both in the United States, each political side being at, this is one of the most contentious elections ever. We have some serious threats internally. But then we obviously have the external threats, which you just talked about, you're going to be going into tonight. We have a lot of external threats. And I think that we could see something radical happen between now and January 20th. And there's going to be consequences for that. And what are the different scenarios that could take place? And then what are some of the things that you can do? And I'm going to talk about how physical gold and silver that you can hold in your hand is going to be an asset class that not only could help you protect yourself, but actually could be one of the most lucrative and biggest opportunities as an investor in the next 90 days, as well as the next 5, 10, or 15 years. And so everybody who is going to be coming to our event, no matter what, whether you do business with Advantage Gold or not, we're going to give away this silver bullet. Now, this is the purest silver that you can get. It's 99.999 in purity, which is the purest you can. It weighs 1 ounce. This thing's really heavy. Chris and I were just talking about how when he got his, how heavy it was. And then we're also giving out about another $100 worth of value. We're going to give away Jim Rickards' new Case for Gold book. It's about $16 on Amazon. It's a hardback book. We're going to send that to you. I produced a documentary earlier last year, Chris, called The Death of the Dollar. We're going to be giving that away for free as well. It's a documentary. You can't find this documentary on YouTube or anywhere else. We're going to give everyone access to that. We're giving access to our gold and silver investment guide. Now, this guide's been requested over 500,000 times. Everyone's going to get access to this as well. It's jam-packed with really good information. When you're thinking about your wealth, a lot of people are thinking stocks, bonds, the money they have in their checking accounts, things like that. Yes, that's one tier of it. But the second tier of it's your retirement assets. And one of the things I'm going to share with everyone tomorrow night is a little known IRS loophole that allows you to use your retirement vehicle, whether that be a 401k, a TSP, a IRA, and you can actually fortify it and do exactly what the central banks are doing and own physical precious metals inside of that retirement account. So the IRS has a section where they allow certain types of coins, very specific types, and Advantage Gold is one of the few companies in America that allows and helps people do that. So it's going to be jam-packed with some great information, Chris.
Yeah, and I've been leading up to it with our audience, mentioning that I'm going to cover some stuff tomorrow night that we've never covered on Survival Dispatch News before, as far as those preps are concerned, and probably won't share anywhere except for upcoming webinars with your team. So first link in the description below. If you sign up and you attend, you get this badass bullet, which I got to admit, the weight surprised me. It really did, because I'm used to picking up bullets like this, which is like Pilgrim Ammo's 9mm, and it weighs nothing compared to your silver bullet. But appreciate you coming on and sharing that with our audience, Jeremy. Everybody else, first link down below. Get signed up. Looking forward to hopefully seeing you all tomorrow night.
Yes, let's see everyone tomorrow night. Thanks, Chris. See you tomorrow night.
All right, take care. All right. Sorry about that, guys. That's an important thing we've been working on for months with the Advantage. They're super guys. Mike, you wouldn't believe how heavy this 1 ounce silver bullet is. It's actually pretty cool. I was thinking maybe if you throw a primer on the back of it, you take out the werewolves, the vampires, everything with it, right? So as I mentioned, no boilerplate at the beginning. We'll do the conflicted question at the very end. I want to jump right into this right away. I want to start with a recent interview with Eric Prince from Blackwater, and he's got an interesting take on how we go after these cartels. You've probably seen it, Mike. I know that you know Eric, but basically a bounty system to encourage people that, hey, if you help out with this effort, you'll make some money off it. So I'm going to play that first, and then straight to you, Mike Glover, to get your input on it.
To see the various GWAT veterans and people that we know that have the tactical capacity to protect this country once again, and especially against the cartels. In closing here, Eric, how would you dismantle the cartels? They seem to operate with impunity on our southern border. We've seen it ourselves in Arizona. We had cartel members wave at our documentary cameras and flip us off. They care so little about that. And then they fired on a Border Patrol agent the day after we were there. So I would really like to see these people wiped off the face of the earth. How would you do it?
So, but first answer on deportation, there's a lot of simple steps the federal government can take that can make it an unpleasant place to remain here illegally. And self-deportation should be the first and best option to say, listen, you came here illegally, leave now and you'll have a chance to come back. But if we catch you, you will never be granted any kind of status here, ever. And I think you'd see a lot of people self-deport, which is great. As for the cartels, treating it like a bounty system is better. Look, the United States has invaded Mexico twice. We do not need to do it a third time. And, Pancho Villa in the early 1900s and 1845, right? From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. We don't need to do that again. But if you put incentives out for Mexican authorities and the privateering model, you can put a lot of very unpleasant pressure on the cartels to choose a different line of work.
So bounties,
we'll leave it at that.
Bounties and special teams throughout Mexico. Okay. Create the incentives, man. It's amazing how quickly the carrot and the stick works when you have the right government playing for the people.
All right. So, Mike, thoughts on Eric Prince's suggestion to make it bounty based?
Yeah, it's an interesting incentive. I think Eric's right on the money where this is going to be pretty complex. I think part of the process is going to be two-phased. I don't think it's a unilateral operation. I think it's a bilateral operation. Part of the action arm is deporting people, mostly in the initial phases, people that have committed crimes here, which means a lot of that deportation is going to take place from jail cell to removing them from the country. That goes hand in hand with likely the targeting. And I think you need to offer some kind of incentive structure. I mean, the estimates are there are hundreds of thousands of members of the cartel. I actually think it's in the millions. When you look at how many people that aren't necessarily involved in the actual cartelling, Like there's an entity that's the C2 node, command and control node. That's the center, the focal point of the cartel. But who is everybody else? It's the same thing that task force, and I've been on hundreds of these targets going after enablers, facilitators, supporters. And often they're just mom and pops. Like they're just everyday people who are incentivized by mostly money, and they're being driven by that money, that culture, that ideology. And so if you put it out that, hey, we're targeting them, you're incentivizing them to turn off the supply chain. You're telling them, hey, you have an option here. You could be targeted by Joint Special Operations Command. We could drop bombs on your head. You could send the National Mission Force, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, all the things. Or you could just comply. You can give us the information. You can tell us where they're at. And what we don't want to get invested in, which I agree with Eric Prince, is we don't want another campaign nor a proxy war. Mexico is not going to allow us to do this unilaterally. They're not going to allow us to drop bombs unless we invest in their country. And that's what I fear. Like, it's very easy to say JSOC is going to kill cartel members. That's like a 7-day period of the campaign. What about everything else? The Mexico government, the new female president, is going to ask for training, facilitation, logistical support, and likely that's going to be long-term, because they're not just going to roll on the cartel and the next day everything's going to be okay. They're going to be dealing with an insurgency of cartel members that are hardcore, that are going to be going after the civilian population and killing more of the Mexican people than they've killed in the past. And by the way, the numbers are through the roof. I mean, last year, there were more people killed in Tijuana than the entire global war on terror and casualties in Iraq. So this is a complicated issue that's going to require a multifaceted approach. And the easy part is pushing the easy button on deploying special operations to kill or capture the top head HVTs of the cartel, which, by the way, is likely already developed in a target package by JSOC.
Man, that's really interesting. I'm going to go clockwise around the panel tonight, so everybody kind of knows when they're coming up. So, Mike Sterling, your thoughts on that short video with Eric Prince?
So I agree. It's a part of the entire thing. I think one thing that we're possibly missing, though, is the current national government of Mexico is currently owned by the cartels. They're completely on the take, so they're gonna have to go to one extent or another. At some point, they're gonna have to go. Us just giving them money is never gonna be able to happen until they're gone. They're too corrupt. They're on the take from everybody at this point. So yeah, I'd say that's going to be a problem. And we can't forget that once we start hitting them there, they will then say gloves off and start hitting us up here on our side of the border. And they've already shown a propensity for being happy with using IEDs in war. And they will very quickly move that into an IED fight again. And we'll wind up with a little bit of an Iraq again.
Okay. I appreciate the perspective. Jeff?
Well, bounties can work, but they didn't necessarily work in Afghanistan. And when I was there in 2002, and we had $25 million bounty on Osama bin Laden. Okay. And same with Mullah Omar and a couple of the others, Zawahiri. And it didn't work. And part of the reason was they couldn't wrap their minds around how much money that was. You're talking about a people where the average annual salary is $220. And we were saying 25 million. You might as well said 25 million gazillion bazillion dollars. It didn't compute with them. I think people in Mexico, it will, but that's only part of it. And you need to incentivize them not to be involved. Obviously, hey, if you're not involved, you won't get killed. But sending special forces into Mexico, yeah, maybe a little bit on occasion. But what I see is, we did it in Iraq. We did it in Afghanistan. Drones. You go to the Mexican government and you say, okay, the leader of the Jalisco cartel, we know where he lives. we're going to have a high-flying drone looking at his house, and when he comes home, we're going to vaporize him. And if you don't like it, I suggest you vaporize him first. And if they complain about it, you just say, people from your country are attacking people in our country. What the hell did you expect us to do? Now, the other side of this is we need to attack the drug supply, the blood drug demand issue in the United States. The reason they're sending drugs into the U.S. is because we have people who are willing to buy them. And we need to crack down on our side as well. Now, the human trafficking thing, a lot of that's for sex trafficking. Now, when you catch people, Arizona just had an amendment to the Constitution where they can give death penalty for human trafficking. Florida has the death penalty for child rape. And we need to take that nationwide. So all these pervs who are taking advantage of these children who are trafficked for sex, if they go, right now, if they get caught, maybe a slap on the wrist. In California, it might even be a misdemeanor in some jurisdictions. But if you make it a federal crime with the upper limit of the crime being death, people will stop. But we need to attack both sides of this problem. There's an American side and there's a Mexican side. And we need to attack both with equal vigor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been wondering, what we do with the government, like the Mexican government, in concert with going after these bad guys. I don't think they're going to be very happy about it, but I don't think they have much of a choice. Mike Glover, got a question for you. Travis sent this to me earlier, and he specifically wanted to hear your thoughts. So he's former law enforcement in Oklahoma, by the way. And his question really revolves around, if we go into Mexico and hunt down these cartel members, what are the chances that they activate, cells here in the homeland to attack us?
Yeah, it's a valid point. The point being that the estimates now are 10 to 20 million, are pretty broad, of illegal immigrants that are in this country. And you have to wonder how much the cartel has infiltrated those numbers. And, as a business prospect, as Jeff was saying, you're bankrupting an entire business that's deeply infiltrated. And when you bankrupt that business, what's the fallout? Well, there's going to be massive fallout. As he described, there's a massive demand. But what about the employees of the cartels? Again, if you're not incentivizing these people who are here doing trafficking of drugs, people, just doing the work of the cartel, then you're not going to likely have a good transition of power. And that's what you need. You need to look at it like we're transitioning power. One of the biggest mistakes we made in Iraq was destroying the Iraqi military and calling them all bad guys. I mean, that decision, which was irrational, which was not logical, and was not the recommendation of most of the tactical ground force commanders, was the precipice for ISIS. And so it's going to have second and third order effects. So what happens when you unplug the supply chain? What happens when everybody who's employed by the cartel as their security bubble no longer have that job? Again, if you don't have diplomatic positions, strategies, and processes in place, what you're likely to do is create an insurgency. And you're going to create desperate times for desperate people. And I'm afraid that, if the cartel waged war, there's not a lot of incentive for people here to say, now I'm going to campaign and conduct an insurgency for the cartel, unless the cartel is holding their families hostage. And I imagine that's going to be part of the strategy. So again, when the gloves come off and we declare war on the cartel, it's not as easy as just lobbing special operations into the country. And lastly, what I'll say is, when we have this idea of special operators going into harm's way, I agree with Jeff. There's no reason to do that. We have all the capability with SIGINT platforms, with ISR, and all the drone capability to do cross-border operations without putting the men and women of special operations in harm's way. I don't want to see guys killed in combat by infiltrating these booby-trapped compounds where everybody's a bad guy. what's the incentive? There's not going to be likely hostages in these situations. It's going to be a whole bunch of bad guys. And I think the biggest mistake we can make, at least initially, is just thinking we're going to send black helicopters, Chinooks, into this country to do cross-border ops to go after these terrorists. The entire network has already been pinpointed, geolocated. We know their pattern of life. The C2 node needs to have the head cut off. That's going to be an easy process. I think everything else is going to be slightly, if not more complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Before you weigh in, Mike Sterling. So there was somebody in the comment section, Mike Glover, made a comment that you have no right to invade another country, secure your own damn borders, end of problem. You're all pro-military industrial complex agents who want to invade always. And my reply to that is you don't have the right to send fentanyl to America that's killing American citizens. And you especially don't have the right to send children into America for child sex trafficking. So it's time that Mexico found out. That's
just to that exact point, which broadly is a good perspective. It's just not in touch with reality. The reality is the sovereignty of Mexico, for example, with a newly elected president, like Mike said, is completely infiltrated. So if we're going under the auspices that you protect your homeland and your sovereign country, we will do the same. That would apply if we weren't being infiltrated by cartel members in the Mexican government and by the country of Mexico itself. They are facilitating the travel and infiltration of illegals, which include already a lot of people who are here for the wrong reasons with malice intent. And so when you run that, it's a national strategic, national defense and counter-terrorist, counterintelligence defense mechanism to go after these guys. And it has nothing to do, like the ultimate contrast would be do nothing and then see where we end up in 10 years. We think the stats are bad now. Wait until they've completely infiltrated us. Sure, you can close the border, but you close the border behind them and they're already here. So we need a lot of multifaceted tactics to be able to get through this, including, and I'm on the bandwagon, including going after the cartel where they bed down.
So both Mike and Jeff made a point quite a while ago, Mike. Somebody said something along the lines that walls don't work. And both Mike and Jeff said unarmed walls don't work. But when you arm them, it's a different story. And Jeff MD used the Berlin Wall as an example on the Soviet side. If you got it within however many feet of the wall, they just shot you. And so in turn became a very effective means to keep those people out of the country. But we've been invaded. We've got a whole bunch of people that have died and are continue to die that shouldn't have. This child sex trafficking thing, we had Victor Avila on, Mike, and I had no idea that he said, like Tren de Aragua, that's their thing because they make more money off of that than they do off of drugs. And then I had JJ Carroll on a couple times, and he started throwing numbers out there that just make your head spin. So when, the DHS said that there was 325,000 children that we lost track of, JJ Carroll said, no, it's 500,000 that we lost control of. And then when JJ was putting together his movie for This Is Treason, there was so much content on the child sex trafficking that it turned into 2 movies. And while he was doing that, he asked people in law enforcement, what's the head count need to be just to tackle child sex trafficking? And the lowest number that anybody gave him, and we're talking people at high levels in different agencies, was 500,000. So we had 1.2 million law enforcement agents under Trump. We have 660,000 today. And he says we need another 500,000 on the child sex trafficking. Doesn't even start to consider the deportation stuff, the mass deportations. But the numbers are, I almost feel like Jeff's describing the Afghanis. They're almost impossible to understand. They're so staggering. But Mike Sterling, then Jeff, your thoughts on the retribution question that Travis asked?
Well, this is one of those situations that the cartels have shown very, very quickly that they're happy to go with the silver or lead. methodology, right? They're pulling out the Sicilian with everybody, and it works. Al Qaeda was doing that for a period of time in Iraq, and it worked for a while. Eventually the population, they couldn't hide among the population because the population would dime them out quick, fast, and in a hurry in Iraq. And in a situation like this, I think one of the problems that we may wind up having, of course, because they will wind up, starting to do their thing here on this side of the border as well. I think a lot of, and I don't think a lot of people are quite prepared for some of the retribution strikes that the cartel is real good at, is usually against the military's families and the law enforcement's families and the politicians' families. They're not going to go after you. They're going to go after your family, and they're going to kill them in absolutely terrible ways. And the problem right now, everybody thinks that U.S. military installations are really locked down hard and, good. Nah, dude, it's a fence. And it is easy to cross that fence. There's no super secret ninja crazy, alarm systems that are guarding those fences. It's 5 strands of barbed wire, or possibly if depending on the installation, maybe it's chain link. We're going to have to change how we do things here, period. It's going to get bloody.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people like yourself, military, law enforcement, say this is going to be pretty ugly and has the potential to really turn a lot of people even more negative towards our country. Jeff,
there's going to be a fight. If you can't smell that there's getting ready to be a fight, you don't have your nose in the wind.
Right. Jeff, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, there's definitely going to be a fight. And we brought it on ourselves by allowing these assholes into the country in the first place. But you also got to look at how many Americans are we losing every year to fentanyl overdoses. And and I'm one of those that, look, you want to kill yourself by taking drugs, hey, that's on you, dude. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It's like, that's the reason why suicide is not illegal. Only attempted suicide is illegal. But I'm like, if you want to remove yourself from the gene pool, knock yourself out. I don't want to pay for it. I don't have to clean it up. But there are a lot of people who are, they're buying, pot gummies that may be legal in their state, but they're laced with fentanyl and they're overdosing. Mm-hmm. Or we've got law enforcement that are doing drug raids and they're getting overdosed just by being in proximity and touching the stuff. But if someone is sending poison into your country, even if a lot of people are willing to take that poison voluntarily, it doesn't mean you still want all that poison coming into your country. I know Keith Graves said, the price of a pill of fentanyl went from like $25 to 25 cents.
Yeah.
And we also need to look at the damn Chinese who are supplying the precursors. We need to tell them and say, knock this shit off, or guess what? All that crap you're importing, we can buy it from Vietnam just as easily as we can buy it from you. We can buy it from Indonesia. We can buy it from India. It doesn't have to come from China. So screw you. We're not, you're undermining our country. We're not buying your products. But there's going to be a fight, and we got to realize that, and we got to accept that. Just like when, there was, back in the bad old days of Prohibition, there was blood in the streets because when people are fighting over turf, and this is very similar to that, except that most of the turf fighting is in Mexico or Colombia. It may shift up here, but you got to make it more dangerous to be the criminal than to be the victim. And my thing is, if you catch somebody coming across the border and they're hauling drugs, weapons free.
Interesting timing for your comment, for 2 reasons. One, Mike Sterling and I just went to the Mob Museum in Vegas last month, and it was really interesting. Mike Glover, do you know Sheriff Mark Lamb? I think you do, right?
Yeah.
So he was on site with us. We were doing stuff with Don Man, and there was like a lull in the production schedule. So Mike Sterling, Cindy, and I, we headed to the Mob Museum, and we walk into this room. There's this really big poster, and it says Sheriff Mark Lamb, or Sheriff Lamb, pardon me. And so I took a picture of it and I texted it to to Mark and I said, "Hey, is this a relation?" He's like, "Yeah, that's my dad's cousin. That's my uncle." And he told us all these really interesting stories. It just, the world's so small, right? I mean, it was just an interesting exchange. But the other reason your comment is good timing, Jeff, Mike Glover, I'm going to bring up this map here from Jack Posobiec, and it shows all of the essentially the path that those fentanyl precursors are coming in, the way the drugs, the human trafficking is all being routed through Mexico. I mean, I know you don't have to convince anybody in the panel that this is an invasion, but for anybody who can look at this map and say that we're not being invaded is blind. And we have every right to defend our country. And if we have to go into their country to stop it, then so be it. But Mike, coming from your background in special forces, from a strategic perspective, when you look at this, where do you even start?
Well, it's there's a lot of what's called an operational preparation of the environment. We used to call it AFO, in specific and special operations. That's advanced forward operations and prepping the environment and getting an intel and information picture of what's going on. That's going to tell you a lot of the networks and all the things that exist and some of the complications you're going to run into at a later time. So these are planning sessions. These are course of action development sessions. And I know this for a fact. When I was the Ops Sergeant Major in Texas, we had part of our mission set to protect the border with the Texas Rangers and, help out the Border Patrol there. And we would attach Green Berets to these organizations to be able to do, basically, protecting the border, because Texas had a very special task force that was dedicated to that. And we used to get the intel picture, a weekly brief of all the things that were going on via the cartel. And that for me, for the first time, trying to disseminate that to my staff, and I ran a staff of senior officers, it was eye-opening to me to see the tactics they were utilizing, the equipment they were utilizing, plenty of capability, plenty of capacity, not a formidable foe, but that's all the assessment that you do. You pay attention to where the money's coming and going. You pay attention to, who's friendly and who's the bad guy. You start developing a picture of the network. That network is going to tell you who's the facilitator, enabler, and who's the head of the snake, who are the high value targets all the way to the top chain of command. And what I'm afraid is going to happen in something like this, because they're so deeply embedded in the population, is one, you could take out the entire C2 node and there's going to be people there to step up. It's like Ranger School. You could be a private in Ranger School. You better be prepared to take over the PL position immediately. So you have to know the plan. There are a lot of players to be able to step up. And it's so ingrained in the security of the people that when that paycheck starts going away, well, what's going to happen? People are going to get desperate in that area. So I think, one, it's not like we aren't embedded in Mexico already. I mean, one of the original sites for my job in the CIA, as far as the Global Response Staff Office, was in Mexico. And it's no secret that Global Response Staff Office for the Office of Security for the CIA goes to high-risk locations to protect CIA employees. That used to be one of our bases of operation. I don't know why it went away. I've always thought that it should be on the docket for protecting people overseas. But we have a relationship and we have agreements. You kind of don't mess with us and we won't mess with you. Well, what happens and what changes when the gloves come off? Think about the embassies that are over there in Mexico City. Think about the expats and American citizens who do business just via commerce. Like Monterrey, Mexico has a plethora of business that is shipped inside, back and forth between America and Mexico. All of those logistical trains are going to be disrupted, and it's going to be a mess. I mean, I just went to Tijuana, which the places I was frequenting were beautiful. And you would have never known there was crime based on where I was located. I went there to get stem cell. How many Americans go there like me to get stem cell because they can't get in America? There's a lot of exchange of trade. I hope Mexico's on board, because if they're not, it's going to be very difficult to get this done. But yeah, it's going to be complicated. And just lastly, I'll say, having done this in many other countries, in Libya and parts of Africa, where we're starting from scratch here, it's what special operations does very well. They have a MDMP process, a military decision-making process. The guys are chomping at the bit. I guarantee you right now, there are planning sessions, they're allocating assets, they're looking and reviewing plans, and they're doing it pretty motivated.
That's interesting. I just read that there's, I think, 74,000 spec op soldiers in our military now, and I don't remember what the time frame was, but when I read it, it said that's an increase of about 50% in X amount of time. I don't remember if it was 10 years, 20 years, whatever, but it does seem like a lot. Before I go on to Mike Sterling, quick question for you. When you look at the west side of this and those fentanyl precursors coming in from China, and you mentioned, the cartels are embedded everywhere in Mexico. What about intercepting them while they're on the water? Is that something that would make sense? Like have our Navy intercept them, take the boats and take the containers of all the fentanyl precursors?
That could be a possibility. I mean, here's the problem I have with that is I always feel like when we're doing something militarily or tactically on the ground, we've failed somewhere diplomatically. And when you have, let me give an example today. Zelensky was asked this morning in an interview whether or not he thought President Trump was going to be able to negotiate an agreement and a ceasefire between Ukraine, obviously his country, and Russia. And he said unequivocally, without hesitation, yes. He said, because President Trump is strong and America is strong. Notice how he didn't say that with the current administration, with Biden, because he knows that Donald Trump is strong when it comes to foreign policy and diplomacy. This kind of issue could be addressed in a simple conversation, because that whole concept of peace through strength, that's what these people recognize. I mean, the Taliban, when I've broken bread in Afghanistan with the Taliban, they knew when you meant business. They knew when you said you would drop a JDAM and destroy this entire village. If you didn't cooperate and you decided to join forces, they knew what that meant, because they saw eye to eye, and you immediately gain rapport and respect. This is what we need to do with China. I mean, they shouldn't be shipping the ingredients from the port in China, let alone getting it to, obviously, the coast of Mexico. So I think it starts with a new foreign policy, a whole slew of cabinet members, which we know are being integrated. And that is going to be the precursor to mitigating a lot of this. 113,000 people died of overdoses last year. 90% of that was from fentanyl. And it's like, this is a deliberate campaign to target and kill Americans. And I don't, that's a national security. That's a national security issue. While we're not paying attention to it, it's part of the reason why Donald Trump and 75 million Americans decided to change the guard.
Yeah, well said. Did you happen to catch that Putin's comments today is that he would be willing to negotiate ending the war, but only with Donald Trump, nobody else?
Yeah.
He said if Donald Trump leading the conversation, he would do it. Otherwise, he wouldn't. So just quickly before I go to Mike Sterling for his comments on these drug routes, I got to tell you, Mike Glover, I don't care what Mike Sterling says. You're a very, very good guy, and you're very, very smart. So, all right, take it away, Mike.
Well, those junior bravos, man.
I was only junior bravo for a couple of years.
He may be the bomb guy, but I'm the bomb thrower guy.
So we were talking about previously, when you and I were in Iraq, and the biggest thing that we needed to do while we were there was deal with Jaish al-Mahdi at that time, those guys. And how did we do that? Well, we cut their logistics throat. And we just gutted them that way, and then forced them to just continue expending without being able to get anything. And then the next thing you know, they didn't have anything to fight us with. And that's a great thing in this situation. If we can cut a massive quantity of the logistics chain coming from China, that will be a big step forward. And I 100% agree with that. But man, it is gonna be ugly, and some things here in the United States are going to have to change. Attitudes towards this sort of thing are going to have to change, and I don't mean just in Washington D.C. I'm talking all the way down to the household level. You're going to have to change how you think about these sort of things. And the problem is the courts have been ridiculously lenient on these people. They've been setting up the revolving doors, and that's not been a good thing at all. But in particular, man, you can buy your freedom on a bunch of this kind of stuff, and it's just been proven too many times. And we're just gonna have to change the way the courts work. We're gonna have to change the way that we do this whole thing, because now we've allowed these wars to come home, and I hate that. But now it is the continuation of politics by other means.
Yeah, well said, Mike. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the supply chain, essentially.
Well, everybody looks after their own self-interest. And the reason the Chinese are doing this is because they can make money at it with no repercussions. If you went to the Chinese and said, stop this fentanyl precursor bullshit, or we're going to stop allowing Chinese imports, and really mean it, and set up, go to other countries and say, we need you to produce this. We want to buy this from you. Then China, because their economy is fragile. People don't think it is, but it is. If they lost us as an export market, yeah, would it hurt us? Yeah, sure it would. But there's a lot of people who can make what China makes. But they would have to say, okay, do we make more money with legitimate trade to the United States, or are we willing to risk that for the relatively small amount of money we make on the fentanyl thing? Because fentanyl, when you do it as a bulk commodity, really isn't that expensive to make or that expensive to buy. Hence, fentanyl pills going for a quarter now instead of $25. They may say, okay, our economy needs trade with America. We're willing to give up this fentanyl trade to secure the rest. And you basically do the same thing with the Mexican government. You say the cross-border trade, from the United States, from Mexico to the United States, the legitimate cross-border trade is, X billions of dollars a year. If you want to see that continue, you will get off your asses, do your jobs, and crack down on these cartels, because we will seal the border. And if we have to seal it for people and drugs, guess what? It's also going to be sealed for semis and trains. And you'll go to Ford and GM and say, you might want to think about diversifying your manufacturing, because what you build in Mexico may not be coming up here very easily, and it's going to raise your costs and everything else. When you make it more costly for them to sell drugs than not sell drugs, then maybe they won't sell drugs. You just got to say, are you really willing to endanger $250 billion in trade just for drugs and human trafficking?
Well,
it's your choice, but we can do it.
It comes back to the old adage that the first thing you do in life is decide what you want, and then you decide what you're willing to give up to get it.
Yeah.
There's that counter price. So, Mike Glover, you mentioned Donald Trump, and I've got a video pulled up with him. It's like 4 minutes long. I'm not going to play the whole video, but I'll play part of the beginning of it, because he essentially says, I'm just going to declare war on the cartels until they're wiped out. So let's hear him briefly.
Our country is being poisoned from within by the drugs and by all of the other crime that's taking place. The drug cartels are waging war in America, and it's now time for America to wage war on the cartels. In this war, Joe Biden has sided against the United States and with the cartels. They are making more money than they've ever made before, times 10. There's never been anything like it. They're major companies. They're bigger than even some of our biggest companies. Biden's open border policies are a deadly betrayal of our nation. When I am president, it will be the policy of the United States to take down the cartels, just as we took down ISIS and the ISIS caliphate, and just as, unlike the situation we're in today, we had a very, very strong border, the strongest border, in fact, in the history of our country, and drugs were at a low of 45 years. There's been nothing like what we did just 2 years ago. We will show no mercy on the cartels. Every day, drug traffickers are using the waters of our region to ship their lethal poisons to America, killing so many of our people and ruining families. In addition to restoring strong border security, I will deploy all necessary military assets, including the U.S. Navy, to impose the full naval embargo on the cartels. I did that before, and it worked. What we did was incredible. We will guarantee that the waters of the Western Hemisphere are not used to traffic illicit drugs to our country. Furthermore, I will order the Department of Defense to make appropriate use of special forces, cyber warfare, and other overt and covert actions to inflict maximum damage on cartel leadership, infrastructure, and operations.
So, I mean, just the whole delivery, and of course, that video is a couple years old. That was during the midterms, but his message hasn't changed at all. But just his delivery is, you can tell he scares the shit out of other countries because he's no BS, right? And he did mention embargo there. I'd completely forgotten that he brought that up before. What are your thoughts, Mike Glover, as far as having the political ability to pull this off, really? Because you can't just say we're going to invade another country technically without Congress, right?
Yeah, there's key verbiage that was used in that speech, including talk of what's called Title 50, which gives the president the authorization to launch covert operations. We're talking sabotage, subversion, the list goes on. The reason that would be beneficial in a multifaceted or phased scheme of maneuver here would be he could accomplish a lot of his goals and objectives, like taking out the leadership without congressional approval or authority, especially when linked back to national security, which obviously it's a national security issue. I think that my inclination, if I was in charge, looking at him and advising him on it, is it's smart to use the Department of Defense in a lot of these things because, the military industrial complex, this thing that this gentleman commented about, is a real thing. It's one of the reasons why I think, for example, Biden authorized long-range missiles into Ukraine or into Russia from Ukraine. I mean, he authorized that because he's surrounded by warmongers who have an interest in campaigning for war and conflict, exacerbating an issue, especially if these people see the light at the end of the tunnel with Donald Trump. And so it's my inclination to utilize the Department of Defense for something like protecting the home front. I mean, I look at things like Mike in fire bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. As a young 18 Bravo, I managed a fire base and focused on physical security as my first priority of work, as you should. And if you don't have the manpower, which Border Patrol is stretched thin, you need to leverage your assets. The biggest asset we have is the Department of Defense and all of its enablers and all of its branches, from the Coast Guard to the Air Force to the Army and Marines. You can get a lot of this work done to protect the homeland. And so I think it's going to begin with covert operations, which likely are already happening, or the planning is already happening now. He's going to activate what's called SAC, which used to be Special Activities Division. As an entity, the Director of Operations is going to go and do a lot of war fighting with no acknowledgement from the U.S. government, with infinite budgets to launch these paramilitary guys in to do a lot of the bidding. They're going to activate a lot of the assets that are already on the ground. We believe the intelligence community that they have so many assets locked into these cartels. We know exactly where they are, who's who in the zoo, and I guarantee even at the top levels, some of them are cooperating already because they see the writing on the wall. And then follow that up by a big military campaign. Donald Trump just promised to utilize the Department of Defense to help with the pushing out of illegals, whether that's wrapping them up or physically facilitating their flying away using military aircraft. And that's setting a precedent. I think it's a good precedent. I think it's going to be complicated, but I'm looking forward to the show.
There's a reason I asked you that question, and I was pretty confident you were going to take things in this direction. But number one, thank you, Roman. We appreciate your support very much. So my follow-up to that was, because I'm not clear on this, and we've had all kinds of experts on that have said that we have to declare the cartels as FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations. When you mentioned Title 50, is that something that can only be, leveraged if we declare them FTOs or not? I would love for somebody to give me an actual answer as to what we gain by calling them FTOs. Like, what power does the president gain by having that happen?
Everything in command and control nodes across the Defense Department is based on initial titles and authorities. You can't do anything without legal titles and authorities in place, including Title 10, Title 50, and congressional approval of a potential campaign for war. There are loopholes. There are loopholes that can be found in border operations and protecting the homeland and home front through DHS and other organizations. But those titles and authorities, more significantly, I think, than just approvals to launch and to mobilize organizations, is the funding for those organizations. This train can't. This entire endeavor, by the way, is going to be one of the most expensive endeavors we've ever leveraged. But my thinking is, if we're spending $56 billion in Ukraine thus far, with more to come, why aren't we doing this as a priority for the homeland? So we'll find the money. And I know Donald Trump and his administration will find the money. If they don't have those titles and authorities in advance, this is why I think he put it out there. Title 50 is at the discretion of the President of the United States. And a lot of the initial work, at least the framework for his end objectives, can be lined out and executed on while he's getting the approval from Congress. And we all know who runs Congress and the Senate now. So I think it's going to be an easy push across the aisle. I don't think it's going to be significantly challenged. I just think it's a very complicated endeavor that requires a lot of effort across all of strategy. It's just not going to be a military action. It's going to be a multifaceted action. And I can't remember who said it, Jeff or Mike. One of the most significant components to this is educating, which I love to be part of this, because this is what we're doing, educating the public. Because, like it or not, they are intimately going to be involved in this in some form or fashion, because it's going to affect them in their own hometown or their pocketbook in some way. And the worst case version of that is with an embedded insurgency and then defending their own homes. We can get into that, but I'm just saying they need to be vested, because they're going to be invested as this proceeds.
Yeah, interesting comment. Just before I go to Mike Sterling. So Tom Homan, very vocal, right? And he was, Trump's director of ICE, and he's going to be the border czar this time around. That way they can avoid all the congressional approval stuff. But on one of the talk shows today, he said a number. I don't remember what the number was, as far as death threats against himself, and then just as many death threats against his family, that they're going to come after his kids and grandkids and stuff like that. And that doesn't surprise me at all. But
it was just from the Democrats.
Right. So, well, I haven't told Mike Glover this, but when Tom Homan was speaking at the Border 911 gala, he got up and he said, on day number 1, we're going to deport all the Democrats, and on day number 2, we're going to deport all the illegals. So, but he's a funny but very serious guy. Mike Sterling, your thoughts on Donald Trump's comments? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, just like Mike was saying, I mean, it sounds really good. You know, it's not meant for folks like us. That's meant for the folks in their homes, and that's meant as a warning to the cartels to let them know, hey, we're coming. All right, now you need to start thinking about this. But you know, does it mean we're going to use the entire U.S. military? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean any of that. But it is optics, and optics are one of the things that you can use to shape the space. And in this case, that is a space shaping comment.
Yeah.
Good observation. Good comments, Jeff.
Well, I think we can take a lesson from the Israelis and what they did to Hezbollah. You know, they were taking out leadership. Well, they did the pager and the radio op were brilliant. I was like, oh my God, if there's a Nobel Prize for covert operations, they just won it. But what they did is they targeted leadership, and as soon as a new leader came up, they evaporated the guy. And then another leader would come up, and he would be atomized. And you need to do that to the cartels, where they said, hey, Hector, we've just promoted you to number 2. I don't want that job, because the last guy is scattered across the lawn. And so if you target the leadership, and think about cartels, they're not like the Islamists that they think if I die, it's a great thing and I'll go to heaven and get 22 virgins. Drug cartels don't think that way. They want to have the big house. They want the girlfriends. They want the fancy cars. They want the jets. They don't kid themselves that that's going to come to them in heaven if they die for the cause. They don't want to die for the cause. They're willing to kill for the cause, but they don't want to die for the cause. And so I think if we start doing serious drone strikes against cartels and known cartel locations, and if we can minimize civilian casualties in the process, to where the neighbors go, okay, I don't want you in my neighborhood because you were in their neighborhood last week and someone dropped a 2,000-pound JDAM on them. I don't want that. I don't want all my windows blown out for you guys, because I'm not making any money by you living in my neighborhood. You need to make them hit the point of diminishing returns sooner rather than later. And an organized army is more effective than a disorganized army. If you have 500 platoons out there running around doing their own thing, it's not as effective as having an army group with General Patton in charge doing his thing. So if you decapitate them, then their effectiveness goes down, and then also their money goes down, because the way the money flows are, it's very complicated, and some little Gomer in Nuevo Laredo is going to be able to figure out the money laundering aspect of it. They're going to start losing money. When they start losing money, they start losing soldiers. When they start losing soldiers, they lose effectiveness. So I think you start at the top, take out the leaders, take out the money, take out the money launderers. And I don't care if you do it kinetically, if you do the flying Ginsu and cut them into little pieces, I don't give a rat's ass. But you make it toward the soldier. If the soldiers aren't getting paid, they're not going to show up to work.
Yeah.
What we did in Iraq was dumb, in that we totally disable or dissolve the Iraqi military. So we basically put 1 million guys on the street with combat training and weapons. Didn't work out too well. And so there almost needs to be something in place to say, we'll give you guys a safety net. I'm talking about the soldiers, not the leaders. We'll give you a safety net. There'll be a soft landing. Talk to the Mexican government and say, maybe give these guys a little bit of amnesty if they work in legitimate jobs and supporting families and have economic opportunities, because you don't want to turn 1,000 guys loose with heavy weapons with nothing else to do but rob people. So you need to support the bottom while killing the top.
Yeah, well said. So
I can get behind that. I mean, let's face it. We've seen it working in Gaza, and we've seen it working in Lebanon and Syria. It works.
And didn't work because we didn't do it in Iraq.
Right.
We need to learn from our mistakes.
So I think there's a little bit of cussing in this video, but it's 2 minutes long. I'm going to play the whole thing because it's actually, I see this as a feel-good video myself, but still interested to hear what the three of you have to say once we play it here.
Mobilize tier 1 units against the cartel. Dude, if those guys are hunting you,
Yeah.
By the way, like, you're done. You're fucking done.
Is that a real?
Thoughts on his comments, Mike Glover? Not the coke part.
He's right, and you know the initial targeting could be done by the National Mission Force, but Evan Hafer is a Green Beret. He actually vetted me for the Central Intelligence Agency as an instructor.
No kidding.
I will weigh this bias because I think it's true that a lot of the operations that we conduct will have to be done with Green Berets. You know, part of the tenure of a Green Beret, and now it's 7 mission sets, is counterterrorism, foreign internal defense. And so you don't win this kind of campaign without likely the host nation agreement to allow partnership by, with, and through operations. If Mexico is going to commit, they're going to commit, and they're going to likely utilize their military, at least their special operations guys, to take the credit for most of the operations that are successful. And that is with commitment, obviously. And if we do that, what you're going to see is a campaign of, in this case, 7th Special Forces Group being augmented by 19th Special Forces Group to go in there, train, assisted, advise, and then leverage assets, American assets, with a Mexican face, but Green Berets working hand in hand with Mexican special operations. I already know it exists because I know 7th Group guys who have trained Mexican special operations. I also vaguely remember, Mike might remember this, a story of Green Berets, I believe it was in Mexico, from 7th Group that winded up working full-time for the cartel and training them in special operations tactics, whatever that means. So when I think about that, I everything he said is absolutely true, but I think it's likely going to be Green Berets doing at least the brunt of the sustainment training and operations, because it's not just going to be a quick strike campaign. That may be the initial phase of it, but then we're going to go into another phase like we have in every period and place of war or conflict that we've been.
Yeah, good comments for sure. That's what a small world. I figured when I pulled that up, you probably knew the guy. Mike Sterling, your thoughts on his position?
So I think one of the problems there comes down to, are we or are we not going to be in basically a 3-way fight in this kind of a situation? Is the Mexican government going to actually support us doing what we're doing? And you can't do FID, foreign internal defense, without having allies on that side, and that's the part that sucks. The thing that I've noticed working with various federal organizations with Mexico is that there's very little trust down there from to the U.S. There really is. I mean, it's a position of distrust, mostly from a position of, let's face it, we've gone to war against each other twice and we're neighbors. And, we've done some stuff in the past, to undermine things down there. I'm not saying during your time, Jeff, and I'm not saying you. It wasn't your part of the world. But we've not done great things as neighbors. We haven't been good neighbors, but then again, neither have they. So I think that this is just it is an incredibly complicated issue. I don't have the answers for being able to actually partner with the Mexican government in this case, because are they actually going to be on our side?
That's a legit question.
It's just my 2 pesos.
No, that's a legit question for sure.
Centavos, by the way. No, I think one of the problems with working with the Mexican government is they're so thoroughly penetrated. You're limited to who you can actually trust. I mean, I've been out of it for 8 years now, but my last gig, I was responsible for CIA liaison on the border from Gulf of Mexico to El Paso. So I've got a little bit of experience with this. And at that time, basically the only ones we could trust out in Mexico were the Mexican Marines. They went in, they could kick ass. You could trust them to do the mission. Federales, Mexican regular army, yeah. If you told them we're going to hit this location, guess what? When you hit that location, nobody was there anymore because they'd warned them. So what you almost need to do and get Mexico to sign on to it is say, we will conduct operations, we will do it, and we'll let you take credit for it. We'll go in, we'll do it, we'll get out, and you guys get to get in front of the cameras and say, look at the bad guys we killed and captured. Look at all the drugs, look at all the money. As long as we don't feel this urge to take credit for it, you have a lot more options. But you can't trust the federales. You cannot trust the national the intelligence service. You can't trust because they're all thoroughly penetrated. But if you can get the upper level people on board to say, okay, we'll turn a blind eye, we'll let you guys take out the bad guys, and you tell us what to say at the press conference so that we can go to our voters and say, look at the good things we're doing. Well, and the cartels will know full well that the Mexican government didn't launch the raid or take out the bad guys. They'll know that it was us because it was actually effective. So that means it was us. If it was effective, it wasn't them. So, the threat to them is lessened in that they know that if they kill off this minister, it's not going to affect anything because he's just standing in front of a camera saying, look what we did. But yeah, it's a complicated issue, and you got to have partners that you can trust, and there may be some, but when it comes down to it, you can't trust anybody.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to pivot to some of Tom Holman's stuff. I had a bunch of links in the brief, but we're just going to listen to the one. It's only about 30 seconds long, but it's worth listening to. And that I've got a funny picture of Tom Holman that I want to bring up as well. So we'll start here.
Run it again. And we know what happens to these children, Sean. And look, the illegal aliens coming across the border, people need to understand, 31% of women that make that journey get raped by criminal cartels. Children get raped. I've talked to little girls as young as 9 that have been raped multiple times. These cartels are animals, and that's why President Trump's going to take them off the face of the earth. They've killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world. And President Trump is committed to calling them terrorist organization and using the full might of the United States Special Operations to take them out.
So check this picture out, y'all. That is Tom Holman in his younger years when he served on the board.
He had hair.
That's a great picture. I mean, it looks like it's straight out of Smokey and the Bandit to me. So the next one I want to bring up here is obviously Tom Holman supports Trump's efforts and the idea of using our special forces in Mexico. So the far left Cato Institute says that it's a really bad idea, that it would be this massive, colossal mistake. And Mike Glover, we've got a link somewhere in tonight's brief with regards to the Spec Ops guys supposedly training cartel members years ago. I can't remember what year it was, but that's essentially the content that the Cato Institute used for this article, where they basically said the Mexican cartels, that their trained guys are just as good as our Spec Ops guys, and that their equipment is just as good as what our Spec Ops guys have. And I'm not doubting that they have good stuff for what they are, but I'm not buying this whole thing that they're on par with our Spec Ops soldiers and that they have our level of equipment. I mean, speak to that if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, in warfare and direct action operations that I've been involved in, in my, for example, 5 trips to Iraq, all in special operations, you're going to run across guys that are more capable. What stands out to me, Libyans that train in the Green Mountains of, right outside of Benghazi, Chechens, all that I've fought and have killed on the battlefield. They're a more capable foe. I've even gone against guys that have had NVGs and infrared laser capability mounted on their weapon systems. I got a watch from a guy that I had where the entire team of Libyans was timed in advance. They had watches synced, they had hiking boots, they had the same kit, and they looked the part. They actually looked the part. But with all that being said, I've seen the most capable enemy forces go against special operations. And the difference is very different and very significantly different. For example, I've been on missions where I've offset 2 to 3 kilometers from the objective and done surreptitious approaches where I didn't even need to pull security, like physically with my gun, because the platform above me had more FLIR capability to identify a threat, to mark that threat, and to kill that threat. And so we forget it's not just, friend versus foe. It's the assets you bring to bear. An operator is only as good as the assets he brings to bear. And maybe the asset is his technical capability and his rifle. But it happens to be, for special operations in our country, the most robust, technologically advanced assets that we've ever seen in history. That continues to advance every single day. I've had 6 platforms stacked above me. So when you take that and you take this leftist propaganda, it's speaking to the American people to convolute their confidence and go against the grain. It just takes a couple operations to proof that. It doesn't take that much. But here's what I'll say about the cartel. They're capable with equipment, but not with the experience. I mean, they could take, rudimentary tools and execute people in an open cornfield that happen to be women farmers for fidelity or for ratting them out. But they've never been against a formidable foe. And so you take that experience and our military capability at the tip of the spear, and they don't stand a chance. They don't stand a chance. And again, I've seen the best of them, and even with the best circumstances weighed, we've completely eviscerated them on the battlefield. So I don't think that's going to be hard, especially when you're using drones and assets and the talent of, Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 and all these organizations that do it for a living. The cartel just pretends to do it for a living.
Gotcha. Mike, your thoughts on this? Is it bluster on the part of the cartels?
So I'm right there with Mike. We're talking about a situation here where, yes, these guys are incredibly well funded. I mean, they have a bottomless well of money, and there's a lot of good weaponry floating around out there in the world. You can have all the cool kit in the world, and it don't mean nothing if you don't know what the hell you're doing with it. Right? That's the bottom line. Look at all the IRGC guys that we were tearing up in Iraq, Mike. I mean, good Lord. I mean, those guys, they kind of had their act together for the most part, but they didn't have it together enough. And every time they stuck their heads up, whack-a-mole. Every single time, man. You guys just put the boots to them, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. So, yeah, I mean, if it gets to a point that these guys, do go ahead and start bucking up, all right, they're gonna find out that let's face it, there's a certain amount of Latino machismo going on here. And that is a psychological factor that needs to be questioned at all times in these sort of things. They do have a tendency to let their mouths or their testosterone overrun their capabilities from time to time. And yeah, this may be one of those situations. Can they stand up against the tier 1 guys? No, there's no.
I typically refer to that as the balls bigger than the brain syndrome.
Yeah.
Jeff, your thoughts?
You can drop me in a P-51. I'm not going to be Chuck Yeager. Okay, the equipment doesn't mean shit if you don't know how to use it, if you haven't been trained to use it, if you haven't been trained to use it for years, which our tier one operators, they drill day in, day out, all day long. They deploy, they gain experience, they come home, they share that experience with others, then they deploy and gain experience. The cartels, special operations guys, they're not in combat every day. They're special operations because that's what they call them. It doesn't mean anything. I served in Afghanistan with the Green Berets. Those guys had their shit wrapped tight. I was not worried about anybody overrunning our compound or anything else, because that's what they did all day, every day. That was their job. That was their reason for being. And I think with the cartels, they call them special ops. That is basically, they're writing a check their bodies can't cash. It's more than just money. It's more than just gear. It's a mindset. And that is something developed. I'm not trying to tell Mike, both Mikes know better than me, but it's something that is developed over years of training, interaction, attitude, mindset. I can go to medical school tomorrow, but it doesn't make me a world-class heart surgeon. That takes years of practice, years of practical experience. And it's the exact same thing with a military operator. That is a skill set that is developed through, making mistakes, doing things right, learning from combat. It's not something you just give a title to. You can't take someone off the street, put them in a uniform, and give them a Green Beret, and they're a Green Beret. They're not.
Well, the Russians tried it. Look how well it's working out for them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're going to be putting, North Koreans in combat. North Koreans have been in combat since 1952. Yeah.
That's a minute or two. All right. So we got a short message from one of our sponsors. It'll kick us backstage, and then the software will bring us back on stage. Necessity truly is the mother of all invention. And there's so many successes like yours where the product didn't exist, the company didn't exist, and you had to invent it yourself to fill that void.
What we provided, even at the time when we started CCW Safe, it was really better than what most officers were getting through their unions or departments. And you mentioned earlier about competitors. I fully believe that whatever, all of our competitors are going to do exactly what they say they're going to do. It's just we do it a little different. We're not an insurance company or a critical response team. We're really the only one in the industry that has a dedicated critical response team like we have. And, that first 48 hours is so important to lock down. So we just do things differently.
So just a quick follow-up to that. We took 18 months before we decided to work with CCW Safe. We've worked with all the other names out there. And at the end of the day, they've got the best coverage for people, in our opinion, for a whole slew of reasons. One of them being is that they don't put an insurance policy on you like some other guys do. And it's against the law to pay insurance benefits out to somebody who broke the law. 95% of criminal charges are pled out, whether the person is guilty or not. If you have self-defense coverage from one of the carriers who's put an insurance policy on you, they can recover all of it. It's a recoupment / clawback clause, and CCW Safe doesn't have that. So they're a good choice. So I got to bring up a couple of videos here of the cartels in action that kind of shows you some of the equipment and whatnot that they have. And then I'll let you all comment on them after we play through them here.
A veces de negro también pixeleado y siempre los ando guachando y a veces armados siguen.
All right, kids, I can't take any more of that music. So I don't know about y'all, but that looks like a homebrew deal to me.
Yeah, I remember this.
I think the Appalachian Rednecks could do better than that first truck.
Probably good for like pistol rounds. I like the drywall knee pads.
Right?
Yeah.
I got some of those in my garage. That's just a Ford F-250.
Ver si muy verga, te topas con nosotros. Ahí tengo desamarrados los perros, culero. Y así voy a andar patrullando. Con tu puta madre. Órale, vente, hijo de tu puta madre. Bríncale a la verga. Bríncale al toro, perro. A tu puta madre. No te pelate a la verga, culero.
Love those Temu radios they got.
Yeah, right. I have no idea what they were saying.
Would hold up to a law.
I'll only play a brief little bit of
I forgot to mention, trank prices are kept fixed by the cartel. The original crooked veterinarian at the top of the supply chain doesn't sell to the Trank brothers or anyone directly. They sell wholesale to a broker who works for a Mexican drug cartel. What are those guys like?
Sturdy, very sturdy. They won't do what I'm doing.
Do they kind of control things on like a high level?
Yes, they do. Prices, people's lives.
For my own safety, I don't want to say which one, but the cartel sets a fixed price for xylazine bottles and closely monitors trank as it travels down the supply chain, particularly as it moves from the Trank brothers onto the blocks, like Kensington. If any blocks are found to be cutting and weakening trank to maximize profit or getting xylazine from outside veterinarians, they would almost instantly be killed, and the cartel doesn't have to do it themselves.
They can get you touched without even being here.
Really?
Yes, sir. They'll drop the price.
Just like a bag on somebody's head?
Yeah, no problem.
And that word just kind of circulates around? In the past year, though, this market has become increasingly difficult to regulate due to an overseas manufacturer called Han Hong Pharmaceuticals, which is an unregulated company based in Wuhan, China. This company, which should be a household name, is funded directly by the infamous Wuhan Institute of Virology. But I like having a YouTube channel, so I'm going to save my cross analysis for another date. Anyways, Han Hong Pharmaceuticals was recently revealed to be the company solely responsible for selling fentanyl precursors to the Mexican drug cartels, who then bake these chemicals in a laboratory into pills and powder to import into the United States. Because of the success of the open-air trank market in Philadelphia, this company recently figured out about xylazine. And so, about a year ago, Han Hong began selling their own variant of xylazine, but instead of liquid, in a powder form for only $20 a kilo, which they've been attempting to sell to drug dealers in Philadelphia on platforms like Telegram and WhatsApp. Unlike the trade of fentanyl, which requires the cartel as a middleman to bake the precursors, Han Hong's invention of powdered xylazine allows them to cut out the cartel as a middleman and sell directly to dealers. For a period of time, this was a real game changer for trank dealers. However, this majorly weakened the control of the cartel, who had already set a fixed price for liquid xylazine bottles, leading them to impose a death sentence on anyone caught receiving or trading powdered Chinese xylazine.
So my apologies. That link was out of order. It was supposed to be played with the last patch, but it's just still interesting. I hadn't even heard of xylazine till I saw that. So questions for y'all. Number one, what did you see in the videos as far as the equipment that the cartels have? And if you want to throw in any comments on the xylazine, by all means do so. Mike Glover, you're up first.
Well, the first thing that stands out to me is they're doing a lot of LARPing. I mean, you know, there's certain things you don't do. And when you highlight for the camera all your equipment and uniform, you're telegraphing everything you have and don't have. It's some of those shots seem to be in low light or no light. They were wearing tinted goggles with no NVGs, nor capability on their rifles of vis or infrared lasers. Most of them are running rudimentary firearms, including AK-47s with no red dots or optics. And they're running soft skin trucks. Like, I mean, there's an F-450 up front with armor on the side, but the entire front end of it doesn't have armor. One thing we have, they don't have, is a robust Air Force. And that capability alone, that entire run, I know this was thrown around in our time period as peer groups of the A-10 going away. Well, the A-10 Warthog would have a heyday with that entire country because of the terrain and its ability to get in. And it would take probably about 15 seconds of a gun run to decimate that entire convoy. Now, what are the capabilities for them to counter that? Likely 12.7, maybe 14.5 anti-aircraft guns. But again, when you don't own the air, when you don't own the night, you don't own the battlefield. All of that is going to be the easiest thing to take out immediately without effort. So what I see is just, I see I don't even see a formidable foe there. I see sitting ducks and easy targets. On the compounds coming from China, I've seen that video. It's a good documentary. What you see a lot of is kind of the infrastructure of the cartel, and the cartel pays a lot of the people that do the dirty work a lot of money. To Jeff's point, when you cut that off, when you're doing, compressions on the chest to keep the body alive, but you cut the head off, what do you have? You don't have a lot of capability. When you disrupt that connection of logistics and money from the C2 head shed to the guys who are actually doing the violence, you don't have connectivity. And then likely you have people who are just going to blend back into society. Part of me thinks that it's really easy to take out the cartel. I don't think it takes a long time. But the other component to it is, what is the fallout? What is the second and third order effects when you take, crank, coke, fentanyl, all the drugs out of the system, and then you have millions of addicted people in America, Americans who can't get the drug? Well, there's going to be a surplus of demand. There's going to be a surplus of logistics and American criminal elements trying to figure out how to feed the supply chain. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of issues, mental health, crime-wise, violence-wise, that good, responsible citizens listening to this are going to have to deal with the fallout.
Well, let's not forget the oxycodone. That was all made here. The whole pillbillies and all that stuff. I was in Florida, and there were like 2 clinics in Florida that prescribed more oxycodone than the entire country. So yeah, you've got to be prepared to say, and I don't like coddling drug addicts, but you have to be prepared with, there's got to be treatment. You got to help people get off the drugs, because they will find something else. It's just like drunks. When you don't give them booze, they'll drink lighter fluid. They'll drink rubbing alcohol. They'll do something. But yeah, and Mike's absolutely right. You have to look, what's the downstream effect, and you have to have assets in place to deal with it. You may have to ramp up methadone or whatever you need to do. But yeah, you just cut off, 10 million. You put 10 million jonesing junkies on the street, you're going to have freaking mayhem.
Yeah, no question. Mike Sterling, do you want to add anything before we move on?
I think these guys covered it all, but I do definitely got to call out Velcro over here on Rumble. His statement just killed me. He said it's like looking at the Mexican version of the Patriot Front.
That's a good line.
Yeah, but he's a good guy.
Yeah, Patriot Front.
That's too funny. Okay, so I've got a handful of miscellaneous links to share and comment on before we wrap up, but we're in the home stretch here. So, Mike Glover, this is what you mentioned. If you pull it up here, U.S. Special Forces trained Mexican drug cartels linked to blah, blah, blah. It was 2021, so it wasn't that long ago. And anybody who wants to read the content of this is welcome to go to patreon.com/survival dispatch, sign up for a free membership. You get all of the briefs for free over there. It's the same document that the 4 of us are going off of as we go through this. Does anybody else want to add any comments on this story from several years ago? I'll take that as a no. All right. So this one here, Texas offers 1,400 acres to Trump admin for criminal migrant detention deportation center. The only reason that this caught my attention was I had just finished watching a video on I believe it was the mayor of LA, who was going on about how LA's been a sanctuary city for 45 years, and that by not cooperating with the feds, that it makes his community safer. And I thought to myself, okay, so here's California versus Texas. Once again, Texas is showing them how it's truly done. I don't know how you could say with a straight face that not deporting people who have criminal records from other countries, known murderers, rapists, and somehow putting an ICE detainer on them, not putting an ICE detainer on them makes your city safer. That makes like less than 0 cents. This one here, just another headline so we can track how fast TDA has been growing. I mean, TDA at the beginning of this year, Intel estimated they had 2,100 members worldwide, and now they're saying that it's swelled to 50,000 TDA members. Next one here, I definitely want to get y'all's input on this one. I'll go through the last few tabs and then we can come back to this, but this intel says that the Chinese submarines can now track and sink our aircraft carriers, and I guess Pete Hegseth commented on it. They could sink all of our aircraft carriers in 20 minutes. I mean, is it possible for somebody like me, a layman? I don't know. I guess so. But on the other hand, it seems like maybe a little bit of hyperbole, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. And actually, we'll stop there because the next one is more for comedic effect than anything else. Mike Glover. So going back to that map, and you got all these fentanyl precursors coming in across the Pacific. If we deployed our aircraft carriers, do you believe that they're at imminent risk from these Chinese subs? And it may be the case. I don't know. I'm just struck me as a pretty bold statement.
No, I think for sure one of the biggest vulnerabilities we have is in the ocean. I mean, just in the last 72 hours, likely Russian saboteurs cut the internet to Finland, doing, subversion and sabotage as they always do, which impacted nuclear power plants in Finland as well. So I just think the idea that our waters are somehow safe based on what's on the surface, I mean, it doesn't take much effort from these superpowers like China or Russia to deploy these assets and potentially impact and affect our security. I mean, to the Navy's credit, we also have countering capabilities to be able to deal with this. I believe in the proactive nature of likely the Defense Department and the Navy being in these waters. I know personally Navy SEAL friends of mine who have served in SDV roles that have done a lot of crazy stuff. When I talk to them, stuff that I can't even mention here, where I'm like, at least I had the idea or understanding that our waters are secure. So definitely a vulnerability. I don't know if it's 20 minutes like Pete said, but it's definitely something that we should be paying attention to, because this is just not going to be land warfare. This is going to be involving a lot of Navy, Coast Guard, and other assets to be able to protect the waters.
So since you mentioned Pete Hegseth, let's pivot there quickly. And we don't need to get into any more of the technical details and aircraft carriers, but what are your thoughts on him being chosen by Trump? I see a smile on your face. I'm assuming that means good news.
Yeah, I like Pete. I mean, I know Pete personally. I'm not very close to him, but a couple of degrees of separation. And I want an outsider. A lot of people, especially liberals, forget that the Secretary of Defense is a civilian. It's a civilian role. And I know he's the right guy because I saw all the leftists come out and say he's just a Fox News host. It's like he got his undergraduate degree from Princeton. He got his master's degree from Harvard, which it doesn't hold a lot of weight with me, except he's educated. I've read his books, which are really good, pointing to a lot of significant issues that are, waging war with our warriors, which is the paraphrase title of one of his books. And look, I want somebody who's going to shake up the system. Also, just closing it out, he is a major in the reserve guard component of the military. He went to ROTC at Princeton. He commissioned as an officer, was branch infantry. no offense to him, but he does have a Ranger tab. I'll hold that against him. That's the only thing I'll hold against him. I didn't see a Ranger tab on his uniform, which I think, at least from my time period, you were going to Ranger school after infantry officer basic course, but that's not near here or there, because I know guys who served with him. An agency buddy of mine is in one of the pictures of him when he was in Samara, Iraq as a platoon leader. I asked him personally, was he a good dude? Was he a good leader? And he said he's one of the best leaders I had. Wow. And that's big. That's saying something big as a enlisted guy, to say a junior officer in a PL position in combat was one of the best officers he served with. So with that being said, in his 20-year career, his 2 Bronze Stars, he had a very good career. That's the kind of guy that I want in that position, not a retired general.
That's awesome. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better feedback than that. Mike, Mike Sterling, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, yeah, that is, if you're ever going to get an endorsement for somebody, that's who I want the endorsement from. Right. You know, let the NCOs tell me, the NCOs that served with that PL, that guy is a PL, give me their opinion. Tell us what, because they're the ones that have seen that guy at his highs and his lows. And can you make a decision under pressure? And there is no pressure like your platoon sergeant looking at you going, well, sir, what are we going to do now? Because that's a bad day for any young lieutenant, man. Yep. But back to the question of how can the mayor of LA say something like that? It's very simple. It's called an account in the Caymans with millions of dollars of cartel money shoved into it. That's simple.
Did you happen to catch, I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, where Tom Holman was doing the news circuit and he mentioned the specific statute where it's against the law to harbor, criminals, especially illegal aliens, and he said you all better be careful because I'm coming after you. Yeah. Speaking to, city, county, and state officials. So that General Vallely actually wrote me an email on that subject months ago. And it was before he wrote an article on it. But he said what he didn't understand at that point in time is how come none of these people who are breaking the law, like these Soros-backed DAs, they're committing crimes by not doing their job. Why has nobody stepped up and charged them? Then he wrote a really interesting article on, he's sharp as a tack. He's 85 years old. And he is right there mentally. And he's a prolific writer. And he released an article on it that got a fair bit of coverage. And now we're hearing people from the Trump admin kind of repeat that, which is good to hear, because maybe there will actually be some consequences for them breaking the law. Jeff, do you want to add anything before we move on?
Yes. Hegseth, real quick. I want a Secretary of Defense who's been shot at in combat. I don't want a general who says, I was in a combat zone. Yeah, you were on a base in air conditioning, surrounded by 5,000 troops. The closest you came to dying is when you ate chicken in the mess and you may have choked on a bone.
But I thought you voted for Tim Walz.
Yeah, no. My brother-in-law was a command sergeant major. When Waltz didn't deploy, he was like, he's dead to me. Okay. But so I want a guy who's been there, because our problem is we have too many people who get us into wars who aren't going to get shot at. In the old Greek way, the soldiers decided if they went to war, and that's what we need. Now, on the Los Angeles thing, what you need there is you say, okay, LA, you're a sanctuary. We're going to announce that nationwide. All you criminal aliens, if we catch you, we're deporting your ass. You'll never come back. But if you get to LA first, you're okay for a while. And when LA, New York, Massachusetts get swamped with hundreds of thousands of violent criminals from overseas, how long do you think they'll remain sanctuary cities? Not very long.
Especially when they're getting zero federal funding.
Make those gentlemen live their hype, and put all the criminals there and say, how long do you like it now? You want criminal aliens? You got them. You got 300,000 of them. Have a good time.
So leave it to the CIA guy who self-professed has never taken any foreign governments down to come up with an idea on how to take down the city government.
It's not a foreign government; it's a city government. That's
Oh,
what I
bull
said.
crap! It's a foreign government.
Well, that's true.
All right, so
Technically, but not officially.
I like to end this stuff on a comedic note. So I've got a quick video from, I think it's the Dilly team. Yeah, Dilly meme team. And then we'll finish up with our recommendations for the audience on things that they can do in light of tonight's conversation. And yes, Mike Sterling, then you can do the conflicted question. But
I already saw where it was.
This one here is this. I won't play the whole thing. It's a couple minutes long, but it's good for a laugh.
Usually, the mentally retarded are divided into classifications: the educable, the trainable, and the custodial. Obviously, we can only assess the abilities or potential of the mentally retarded on an individual basis. Seemingly random motions and movements are fairly common among the custodial retarded, and they may take many forms. Sometimes there are motions which seem to have no meaning whatever and may even cause unintentional self-inflicted injuries. The vast majority of the mentally retarded are intelligent enough that they can be taught a great many things. However, there's a wide range of ability even among those considered educable, and their ability to learn obviously varies according to their level of intelligence. Equally important is a stimulating environment. However, we must remember to set realistic standards that are not too high for the individual. Many of the trainable retarded can learn to take certain kinds of household responsibilities, some of which may be more complex than they are usually given credit for. It would be wrong to expect a mentally retarded person to become a master craftsman. The standards are too high.
Anyway, if you go to patreon.com and grab the brief, you can watch the whole video. It actually gets better the more it goes on. It's pretty comical. God bless the Dilly meme team. Those guys are doing God's work for sure.
Oh my God, it's genius.
All right. So in light of I like to end with a laugh at Mike Glover, just because it's good for mental health and whatnot. Bad pun, by the way. All right. So based on tonight's episode, I put together a few things for your average Joe, what they can do in light of this cartel stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So one of them is, this was a great suggestion on somebody's part. I don't remember who I was following that put this up, but it's essentially the phone numbers to call immigration, customs, all these places, as far as if you come across, illegal aliens, where you can actually call this information in. So I thought that was good information to have. The second thing, which quite a few people from Survival Dispatch have been donating to the Remnant Ministry, which is Mike Glover's buddy, Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers. They served together, and of course he's friends with the rest of us, but Mike Glover actually served with them. Their lines of effort now, beyond gathering intel at the border, beyond child sex trafficking interdiction, beyond helping other people set up ministries, has been in North Carolina doing the same type of work that Mike Sterling did, helping the Hurricane Helene relief efforts. And then the next one I have up here, this is Tom Holman, nonprofit Border 911. So, donating time or money to either one of those would be good. It's a good way to support people who are actually making a difference with regards to cartels and the border problems. And the last part would be, support your local law enforcement, especially drug and gang interdiction units, because just like everybody said, these three gentlemen are experts on this stuff. I'm just the host. That this is going to be ugly business, going to war with the cartels and doing deportation. So your local law enforcement, especially gang and drug interdiction units, could use some moral support, if nothing else. Mike Glover, you got any other thoughts on what the average person can do to kind of help with these pretty significant efforts?
Yeah, just 2 points. One, today, Laken Riley's killer was both convicted and sentenced to life in prison, which isn't enough. I mean, he should have been dismembered out back for what he did. Laken Riley fought for 18 long minutes, according to her Garmin watch, before her heart stopped, before her head was crushed in by a rock and she was asphyxiated at the same time by an illegal that was here. One is too many, and there are many more examples of that, but that's what we're dealing with. I will say, number two, just as a tangible, communications is going to be really important, especially if things get crazy. If you have infrastructure being attacked, cybersecurity threats, etc., you need tangible communication. And I will tell you, because he's at the tip of the spear of it, Elon Musk Starlink, and I'm not sponsored by Starlink, nor am I promoted by SpaceX, but having a Starlink Mini, the roam or mobile version or a home version to be able to communicate via satellite over the horizon is super significant and important. I have all of them because I believe in redundancy. I believe in a pace plan. And my favorite is the Mini because I can literally link it up on a motorcycle. It's powered by about 40 watts. It's convertible and inverted to 12 volt to 110 or AC power. And I have comms no matter where I go. And so all comms could break down. And I'm sure Mike saw this with Hurricane Helene victims. Starlink was the way to communicate because you were able to push data. So at a minimum, people should consider that for communications.
So great advice. You would think somebody in this industry like myself would have contingencies. And Hurricane Milton took down our cable internet like it always does. And the cell tower for our area is so weak that we actually have one of the units that takes our cell phones and routes it over our cable internet, right? I got rid of the cable internet. We're now on fiber optics, which is amazing. It's giggy up and down. But I also got Starlink for all the reasons you just mentioned so that I'm not kicked off at any point in the future. And right now, for people in the Southeast that were impacted by Milton or Helene, if you buy one of the Starlink packages of hardware, you get free service through till January the 1st, and you also don't have to pay the $100 congestion fee. So I got my Starlink, I don't know, a few weeks ago, like not long after Milton, like the week after Milton, and I saved $500 on it basically by getting it free through till January the 1st. And then I also discovered that you're right, like the small one is great for portability. And when you buy the roaming package, like you can turn it on and off, which I don't think everybody knows. You don't have to be paying for Starlink all the time. If you need it, you can turn it on and then you get billed. So the mobile version that's $165 a month or $160 per month for unlimited data is 50 Mbit down and 10 Mbit up. What I didn't realize till after the fact is that if you buy the standard home kit, which it was $349, taxes and shipping came to $391, you can put the roaming package on it as well. So it's not as small as the mobile, but like it's still small enough that if I'm going from here, let's say to a campground, and then from that campground to another campground in the RV, I can turn it on and take it with me. So bottom line is, for under $400, you can buy the equipment. And if you're not using it, turn it off. And if you need it, turn it on. It is an awesome contingency. And that was a great suggestion on your part, Mike. Milton was the last hurricane we're going through without internet. Kind of figured we should have had that in place ahead of time, but better late than never.
Yeah,
Mike,
especially since it shut SDN down for 5 days?
6 days.
Yeah, we were dead in the water.
Yeah. So, Mike Sterling, any thoughts on what people can do in light of the cartel stuff we just discussed?
Yeah, I'm gonna second the Starlink comms, because I'll tell you what, mine's on the way right now. I ordered mine. It's an investment, guys. Just go ahead and do it. And I went with a Mini primarily because of the portability issue. I may not use this on a regular basis, but I'm going to have it preloaded, prepaid for, and ready to go anytime I need it. Then I can also put it on my camper, or I can take it out whenever I'm up in the Badlands up in Wyoming and stuff, doing operations up there. I've just looked at this and I said, yeah, I think the company needs to pay for that. Bam. So yeah. But to add on, I think your local network. You need to buff up your local network. You need to get your neighbors involved, things like that, and get a good, solid line of communication, even with just your neighbors. Go out, meet your neighbors. All right. Understand what's going on in your neighborhood. Know who's doing what, what's going where. Local intelligence.
Yeah,
move on from there.
Well said. Jeff, you got some thoughts on that?
Well, these guys covered it as far as Starlink and neighborhood comms go. Going back to the Lake and Riley issue, I think I'm going to sound barbaric and medieval, but there's something to be said for hanging, drawing, and quartering in public to send a message. And if anyone deserved that, it wasn't William Wallace, it was this guy.
Right on. So
public executions made a. I told the story of my grandfather when we went deer hunting. I was 12 in the mountains of Arkansas. And he showed me this old ancient oak tree. And he says, I saw my first hanging from that tree. And it was a guy who had raped his own daughter and admitted it. And they just strung his ass up. And something to be said for that. It makes an impression. Executions should be public. And this guy should be executed.
I don't disagree with that at all. So, Mike, before you hit us with the conflicted question, so this is Trump country, and I want to say there's somewhere around 500 homes in our community. It's a very old community here in Ormond Beach, and we would ride our bikes around the neighborhood, walk the dogs, and see who had what signs out. And out of 500 homes, we saw 3 Kamala/Tim Wall signs, right? So we go to the church to vote around 5 p.m. on November the 5th, and we come home, and some asshole put this in my front yard.
Tell you, they make great range targets.
It was you. Don't try and cover your ass.
So anyway, I got this badass flamethrower from I can't remember their name. So that's going to meet an untimely death this weekend with the flamethrower. I'll do a video on it so y'all can get a laugh with me on it. All right, Mike Sterling, hit us with the conflicted question of the night.
Okay, conflicted question of the night. I'm not even going to go into all this stuff, but we want to hear from you out there in the comment section. Get into the comment section, roll around in the mud, get bloody, fight each other over this. Fight. Come on. Yeah, come on. Let's see it. Anyway, so apparently something's happened. I'm not really sure the circumstances behind this, but with both the president and vice president dead, the Speaker of the House needs to choose a vice president. Who would you choose and why? This is an interesting one. This is new.
Yeah, it is. Jeff?
John Kennedy from Louisiana.
That's not bad. Mike Glover?
This is down selecting a president?
No, this is the Speaker of the House is now president in line of succession, but needs to choose a vice president. Who would you choose?
Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi's a personal friend of mine.
Right on.
She came to the right side. She's capable. She's going to do a good job as the director of national intelligence, and she hates more than I do the deep state. So I think she'd be the right person for the job.
Good answer. Before Trump had chosen a running mate, I felt that Trump should have done what Obama did in 2020 by having a VP who was even worse than the president. So who would want to assassinate Joe Biden and end up with Kamala Harris, right? So I wasn't suggesting that we have somebody as retarded as either one of them, but somebody who was just as toxic to the left. And there's a guy that we all know who is incredibly intelligent. He's functioned at the highest levels that I actually think would have made a fantastic VP. But in this hypothetical situation, I'd absolutely say so is Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers. He's one of the most patriotic men I've ever met in my life. He stands firm on everything. And you know what? If somebody was to take out, let's hope we don't get Mike Johnson as a president at any point in time, because what a shit show that would be. But if we had to have somebody in that VP role, I would love to see Doc Pete in that role because he would slay the left. They wouldn't know what hit him. Is that who you were going to choose?
Well, you got to cut the legs out from under me, man.
I think you picked being last.
Well,
if you're not first, you're last.
Ain't that the truth?
Thanks, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah. All right. So one final shameless plug for Advantage Gold. Hit the first link in the description below. Sign up for the webinar, which is tomorrow night. They're going to send you a 1 ounce solid silver bullet. It's the size of a 45 ACP. I think an ounce of silver right now is going for $32 or something. It's projected to go quite a bit higher than that. It's surprising how heavy they are, plus a bunch of extra stuff. Plus, I'm going to be covering some grid down stuff in that webinar tomorrow night that I haven't covered here on our channel. Other than that, Mike Glover, really appreciate your time as usual. I'm just give me a second. I'm getting there. I got the notes, so I'm not going to forget tonight.
Yeah, right.
Come on now. It's, I'm just going to turn around and say it's on my left side. I didn't see it. So
right.
All right. Anyway, Mike Glover, really appreciate your time. It's good to see a smile on your face for sure. And it's good to see you cranking out the videos as well. So our audience loves you. We love you. And we're really happy that you joined us tonight.
Well, we like him. Love is a strong word.
You'll love me one day.
I love my grandkids. I love my wife. I love my dogs. Other than that, yeah.
Listen, as long as we're not using some special pronoun or anything, it's just bro.
No,
It's all
I
good.
love John Wayne, but he's dead. So
there you go. All right,
Mike, I love you. We've been on the same hits before, buddy.
Right on. All right. Anyway, Mike Glover, really appreciate your time and input. Very enlightening as per usual. Mike Sterling, same. Glad that you could join us tonight. Jeff, you're a stalwart on SDN. We really appreciate it. Everybody out there, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and God bless America.
God bless.
Give me a hypothetical response on the part of CCW Safe to Alan Coley's, incident.
Yeah. Well, we have ever since the beginning, we always err on the side with our member. And if they are granted a hearing on self-defense or self-defense standing, then we're going to provide services, period. We've had and you talked about the stand your ground, even brandishing. A lot of those cases, we get them an attorney. And even if it's something outside of our terms of service, we're not going to, we don't say you got to pay that money back. So we're always going to start services immediately. We're always going to get a retainer, get bond if we have to bond them out, whatever.